Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond the Hire podcast. On Beyond the Hire, we dive into recruiting for the go to market space, what it takes to build winning teams, and how industry leaders got to where they are today. Exciting today, we have a part two, our very first part two. In our previous podcast, we said there's so much more to ask you, Heather. So would you come back? And she did. She is back. We are accompanied by Dr. Heather Doshay. She is the founder of Waypoint Works, a coaching and embedded advisory partner helping startups scale intelligently. Previously, when she was on the podcast last, she was the partner and head of talent at SignalFire and the founding executive and VP of people at Webflow. She brings hard earned operator insights to founders and their teams. She holds a doctorate in leadership, and her insights have been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Forbes. Thank you so much for coming back, Heather. I really, really, really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. Any conversation with you, Sandra, is an exciting time for me.
Honestly, it's also exciting for us because I believe your podcast was like either the best listened to episode or the second best listened to episode.
I'm
So
incredibly competitive, so that makes me secretly very not so secretly very happy.
I'll let you know how this one does. Is part 2 even more popular? But a lot has happened since we last spoke, so I feel like there was so much left to ask, but then you also made some really exciting moves. So maybe let's start there. So when we last spoke to you, you were the partner and head of talent at SignalFire, and we're partners with SignalFire here at Bets, and that's why how we got to know each other. But since then, you've made some big moves. Do you want to tell everyone listening what you've been up to?
Yeah, so back when I joined SignalFire, I was always deciding, do I want to do VC or do I want to go out and take a bet on myself, do my own thing, and do coaching and leadership consulting? And I never knew that I would get a VC role so quickly. That was so exciting. And so fast forward 4 years later, had a great time, but it was still always itching the back of my mind. And so I finally launched the thing, which is called Waypoint Works. And it is embedded advisory and leadership coaching for high growth startups and other organizations as well. I'm not discriminating against non-startups too. I've got a fun client there too. And basically what I'm focused on is the companies who really invest in high slope talent. So this is the talent that is up and coming in their career, maybe unproven in the role they've been in before, but now they're reaching greater heights and trying out new things and climbing in their role. And I want to help those people really succeed and find the right kind of balance of challenge and support, while also building the systems for the companies that are going to enable that kind of culture to exist.
So when I was reading a little bit about waypoints, and obviously you were sharing a little bit with me, you wrote a lot about high slope.
Yeah.
Can you explain that concept? Because I haven't heard that a lot.
Yeah, I think it's the most under discussed concept in really startups and tech altogether. It's the idea that when you go to hire somebody, you could choose to hire somebody with the most experience for the job, or you could choose to hire somebody with the most potential to grow at the fastest pace or who's growing at the fastest pace. And so, what you're looking for with high slope is somebody who is going to be growing up and to the right at a steeper pace. Imagine like a Y intercept essentially, where the company is growing at a certain rate and most people grow at a certain rate. And when a company is growing super fast, at some point that company outgrows the people they've hired. And then you have to kind of either top them or backfill them. And it's kind of messy for everyone involved. But if you hire someone who's high slope, their rate of growth is actually outpacing or pacing with the company's growth. And therefore, they never really reach that point where you have to top or replace them. They kind of grow with the business. And I think about these examples of all the great tech companies who've had examples of high slope people inside. Andy Jassy at Amazon, he was the marketing manager when he joined. He was like an unproven marketing manager who just so happened to join in 1997.
Wow.
And Jeff Bezos saw something in him and gave him a bunch of special projects. And he kind of just rose to the occasion each time. His slope was super high. And now he's the CEO of Amazon. He's the successor to the person who hired him. And so when you think about these people, they exist inside of every company. Facebook has them or Meta has them. These are the people who join relatively unproven, super smart, super persistent, super high EQ and low ego, and they just do the work. And over time, they're able to really keep pace and maybe even change the trajectory of the company and pull it up with them.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. And I'm going to be Googling this person later because that's fascinating, especially someone who's a marketer. That's a
Yeah.
really interesting trajectory. And I love that concept. And it's something actually we've internally at Beth's been discussing as well. We're really good at placing first time executives, even, right? For example, someone who's been really nailing it in sales, but they haven't had the head of title yet, but they're so ready for it. And we know they're going to be incredible if they're just given that opportunity. If we're really good at placing that kind of talent. So it's really interesting that we've been having that conversation as well, just not had the terminology the way you do.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think we talked about this in the past podcast. You're a researcher. So I'm not surprised that you have the right terminology pretty much for everything that you do and it's well researched. But I love that. That's really interesting. Do you have another example of like someone who has that high slope journey?
Yes, I have a great example for you. Jamie Whalen at D Scout is their VP of operations. And it's so interesting. She is my first feature in this blog series that I'm doing on high slope people. There's going to be more to come, lots of really great high slope examples out there. But Jamie joined, she was maybe 2 years out of college at the time, had one startup job prior that had a really cool experience and exit. And she was trying to figure out what was next. And she interviewed with this company, D Scout. She was really excited about them, not for a job, like an informational interview, because she thought that what they were doing was really interesting. And at the end, she said, "Are you hiring?" And they said, "Sorry, no, we don't have any open roles." Here's where high slope kind of comes into play. A normal person would have walked away and gone, "Okay, thank you. I'll keep tabs on your careers page and check back and see if anyone hires later. I'll just find you on LinkedIn
Yeah.
and see what happens." She decided to go research everything about the company. She went back and she said, "I'm going to look through every Google search listing, every blog post, every YouTube video, everything that's out there." And she basically found, if she went 3 pages deep on Google search, and found that there was a unlisted job posting for a role that they had at one point posted but never hired for, and thought, "I could do that job, but actually I think they should do it differently." She rewrote the job posting as an 8 page document of what should really get done by the business. She went to like probably Kinko's or FedEx, this was 11 years ago, I don't know, had it printed and bound in like a hardcover book and dropped it off at them at their office. And so then basically 3 days later, a weekend goes by, she gets a call, "Just tell us what job you want here. Like, let's talk about hiring you." And so that's the difference. It's not just to say that high slope people grow at a faster pace and then you watch their pace of growth. In hindsight, you can always see who was high slope because they're up and to the right. But what are the leading indicators of how someone is actually going to be high slope when they're not yet proven? Like you mentioned, they've never had the head of sales job, but you know they're ready for it. You know, if given the chance, they could do it. What are the indicators that allow you to have the confidence to know that they could do it? And in her case, that's an indicator. Like, what are the pieces of evidence that you can work from? So I think that's like just one example of a high slope story. There are thousands of them. I think I've been high slope at points in my career. I know that you both have as well.
No, it's so interesting. And it's very inspirational, right? Even I think back, and I don't know if any of these stories are true because you know about LinkedIn, but these stories where someone's like, oh, they didn't have time to see me or look at my CV. So I dropped off a cake with my CV on it and they finally called me back. Those are
Mhm.
original ideas of people who are like, whatever it
Yeah.
takes, they're going to acknowledge me. Whether or not they hire me, that's up to them, but they're going to
Mhm.
acknowledge me and who I am. And I'm going to get in front of them, whatever it takes.
Yeah. There's a Steve Martin quote, "Be so good they can't ignore you." And I like to think about that Steve Martin quote whenever I think about high slope people. And sometimes they're doing it intentionally. They have an extra grind. They're not completely these like angels who just happen to do above and beyond work. But I think there's like a chip on a shoulder that exists within some people where they are going to grind until it's done and maybe beyond done because they don't deliver mediocre anything.
No, I think that's so interesting. They find what needs to get done, and even if no one's given them the task, they'll do it
Mhm.
because they know it'll improve the business or even their
Yeah.
own career trajectory. That's incredible. When did you first hear the concept? Is that something that kind of found you, or were you researching this? And what is the terminology to use?
Yeah, there's all these buzzwords that exist in the world, and I usually hate 95% of them. So when people talk about like talent density, or they talk about like, I don't know, the great resignation, or, one of these, whatever, quiet quitting, I roll my eyes at 95% of the terms and go, "Okay, what do you really mean? And like, what's the point of it all?" I
Yeah.
heard high slope. There's been a lot of people have mentioned it over time, but it's never been really taken and turned into the founding principle of a company from what I've seen. And so for me, what I wanted to do is lift up this term. It's not a buzzword. It's a concept that we can all relate to when we see it. We know it when we see it, but it's not necessarily something that's been expounded on. So where I started layering pieces in was where it got really fun for me. So I came up with a framework for how do you assess what a high slope person is, because whenever there's a buzzword, but you can't put assessment to it, you can't recognize it, there's no evidence, there's no data, you're kind of working on a concept and everyone's definitions start to do a little bit of dispersion of almost it becomes this floating thing that people talk about, but no one really can name it. So I'm big on like giving it a name. And that's where I'm kind of layering into the concept itself. So it is a concept that existed before me. It just wasn't as popular as I think it should have been. And my mission is now to popularize it, to give a voice to all the people who are quietly on this high slope journey and don't yet have the name to describe what they're achieving for themselves.
No, I love this. And it also, just from a marketing perspective, is really clever to lean into that. So that if
Yeah.
anyone looks it up, you'd be the first kind of result because you're talking about it. You're the expert on it. I mean, that's the goal, I'm sure.
I'll need your SEO help after this.
Oh, I got you. This is where immediately where my mind goes. And I'm like, gotta make sure that you fill that white space and that whoever wants to talk about it or research it, they end up on your doorstep to talk to you or to work with you
Yeah.
on both sides, right? On the candidate side as well as on the client side. That's really exciting. I love that concept and it's
Yeah.
really, really clever. And that is what everyone wants, right? I used to work with a CEO and he used to have this theory that for the growth of the company, depending on what stage the company was at, you needed different people, right? The way he said it is kind
Mhm.
of like from 0 to 10, you needed one person, but that's probably not the right person from 10 to 50, and it's probably not the right person beyond that. And it's interesting that this goes completely against that idea of no, you can have someone who starts at 0 and actually grows all the way to beyond whatever number you had in mind. Obviously, Amazon did better than I'm sure anyone could ever have fathomed back then.
Yeah.
So that's really, really interesting, that concept that they found that it's not just about finding the right person for that moment in time, but finding the right person for the journey.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that with him because 90% of people are not going to necessarily be the highest slope. Everyone's on a slope.
Yeah.
Some people are plateaued and they're flat, which is not who you necessarily want to hire, but most people are on a decent slope. They're going to grow. They're just going to hit a point where the business shifts and needs different things. And the high school people there are the ones that are the exception to the rule. They're not necessarily the rule. And so I do agree. And I actually wrote an article back in 2018 in Entrepreneur on this exact topic of who do you need when you're this size versus this size for this size, because early on, you do need people who are creative, imaginative, able to think broadly, do many jobs at once because there's only so many people to do way more jobs. And so everyone's
Yeah.
wearing 18 hats. But as you kind of quote unquote give your Legos away over time, you start to specialize. And then you don't need the specialists and you need the people who can optimize and who've seen the journey before so that mistakes aren't made the same. But there's still room for a good portion of your team to be brought along if you can match people. So in total organizational design, you might say, hey, you've got a high slope person like leading marketing or leading product or leading whatever the category area is, but you might pair them with like a fractional advisor, or you might pair them with a board member or give them mentors or coaches or opportunities to help that person grow with someone who has seen the movie before, because they're going to learn at a faster rate than anyone else and they're going to pick it all up. And so that person will be able to continue on and defy the odds, but you're still going to need people who are stage relevant across the board because not every single person is going to be super high slope. It's just a rare kind of trait set to have. And I think if you can find the right org structure that kind of mixes and matches that blend of people, you create a high performance organization that actually better utilizes the resources available to you than one who just takes all of one strategy or all of another.
Interesting, because I'm also now curious, what are
Mm.
the traits of someone who is not high slope that maybe the person that you do need to replace when you get that to that next phase of growth within your business?
Yeah, well, hopefully there can be people who are very senior who are also still high slope. You can usually see it in like the fire and their pace of learning. Maybe if I tell you, let me tell you the framework that I use for what is high
Yes,
slope.
please.
So I call it peaks because I was looking for a mountain related theme. And so honestly, there are like words I would use to describe it maybe are slightly different than what's here. But essentially, the idea with peaks is that you get PEAKS. So P is persistence. These are people with high tenacity. They get things done. They are going to not give up even when the odds are against them. And even if they haven't done the job before, you're going to see it in things they've done in their past, in their personal life, in whatever else there might be. And then you're going to see E, which is emotional grounding. This is someone who is low ego, steady under pressure, coachable. They may not be all of these things, but they have the emotional self awareness and grounding to be able to manage themselves through the many changes of a business. So as the business matures and now you need a different type of polish or person, they're going to grow into that themselves. The next piece, which I think I resonate personally the most with in my own high slope kind of past and journey, is action orientation. So this is a person who's not waiting for all the instructions and ready to set go. This is a person who is going to move forward without perfect information. They're going to just get stuff done. And they always see an opportunity, even if you don't ask them for it. They're the person who's going to go the extra step and do the assignment that was never assigned to them. And then K is a knowledge sponge. And this is the piece that I think is so critical for how they get there over time as the needs change. These are people who learn faster than other people. And they don't just learn new stuff, they apply it instantly into what they do. And I can give you an example from my previous team at SignalFire actually on that. And then systems thinking is the last one. And that's the piece that pulls it all together. If you don't have systems thinking, you can be high slope in the early stage of a company, but you will not scale with the business over the long run because systems thinkers can see kind of the big picture and the details at the same time. They can see kind of around corners, the immediate tasks that are existing and what's going to exist later and the impact on the business. And they can build within a broader organization. So if you have peaks, persistence, emotional grounding, action orientation, knowledge sponge, and systems thinking, when you see those traits in a person, you know that they are high slope. And they should floor you with those traits, not just have a little check mark next to them.
I love this. I want to dig into all of these, but let me start by systems thinking because I feel like it might be what I used to just refer to as bigger picture thinking. And
Mhm.
that's to me personally always a very interesting topic because it's years and years ago when I worked for a CMO or reported into a CMO. She used to say to me, put some time on your calendar for bigger picture thinking. She was like, I think you need to do more of that. As in, like, don't just get stuck in the busy work, even though it's great,
Mhm.
and you work hard, but also make sure you're taking time to look at the bigger picture and is what you're doing really moving the needle forward, or is it just busy work? And I remember just kind of having that on my calendar every week and be like, okay, bigger picture thinking. How is this supporting the business goals? What's next? How does this inform something else? Yada, yada. I'm sure you get it. Is that kind of what you're referring to with your systems thinking?
It's both and. So there are executives who only do big picture thinking and they have no clue what's going on the ground and they're completely unconnected, disconnected to what's
Yeah.
happening. The ability to zoom in and out. So if you ever heard the phrase, I can see the forest for the trees,
Yeah.
imagine you are a person and you are standing on the ground and you are looking at a tree ahead of you. Your task is just to chip away at the trunk of the tree and scrape off the bark. And you're like, okay, my job is to chip away at barks on trees. You would just chip away at the same tree for a very long time. But if you were to take two steps backward, you'd actually see, oh my gosh, wait, there are dozens of trees ahead of me. I might need to figure out a system that's going to make this more efficient because I'm never going to get this job done if I'm just chipping away at the one tree,
Yeah.
right? So, and now I say, okay, well, maybe if I had a tool, maybe if I built a team, maybe if I did these things, these are the ways that I could chip away at the trees faster. And now take it one step further. Imagine someone gave you a hot air balloon and now you could rise up above the trees and see the whole forest. What you might need to build for yourself as a system, if you're just chipping away at one tree, is different than if you have a dozen trees. It's different than if you have a forest that has 10,000 trees. And you don't really know what system you're building for because both the forest is growing in this metaphorical kind of example because it's a business. And you can only do so much at one time. Like resources are limited. You may not be able to hire the crew that can do 10,000 trees. And so systems thinking is really the ability to say, okay, let me assess the current state of the trees. Let me look at the future state of the trees. And let me figure out what are the systems that can accomplish what needs to get done today and tomorrow in a way that we're efficient and we're not wasting time. That's really how I would describe systems thinking. And now, if you add in layers of organizational complexity, there are other people trying to do other tasks in the forest. Can you chip away at the trees without impacting people who are planting flowers on the ground and who are kind of hunting bears or whatever? This is a terrible example as I say it.
No, I love it because you can't throw a stick of dynamite and be like, "Done," because you ruined everyone else's work.
And you might have blown up everybody else's jobs to be done. And in a small organization of 10 people or $1 million revenue business, it's very easy to just like focus on what's in front of you. But you still want a little bit of a sense of big and small. But as it gets bigger, now you're dealing with other teams trying to operate in the exact same plane. That's where a lot of people who are high slope that thrive at seed, series A, series B start to break down, not scale with the business past that. And I think about founders. A lot of times you'll see like two co-founders and one emerges as CEO and scales the business and the other kind of maybe a CTO, and this is not always, but they suddenly like realize like I don't like the complexity of this business and they go off and start like a labs on the side of the business or whatever else. That's
Yes.
normal. They just want a different forest.
It's so funny because one of the
Yeah.
companies I worked at, that's exactly what
What
happened.
happened? Yeah, I say it because it's common, yeah.
Yeah, that's really funny. I mean, to be fair, it's also in Apple, of course, you in most famous companies, this is the case.
Yeah.
Next question, then that's really good about systems thinking. Low ego, question about that,
Mhm.
right? Because I think it's a fine balance between low ego, but it's still advocating for everything you've done, especially
Mm.
if you're reporting it to someone who may or may not just naturally, they're not the ones to sing your praises or to recognize the work. I am also someone who says, be proud of what you've done and speak proudly about it. But
Mhm.
then I think low ego is also super important, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what combination works best for low ego people.
Well, and maybe it's not even just low ego, it's emotional grounding, really. Low ego is a piece of that, but everyone has an ego. And what is low, what is not, and how do you balance and advocate for yourself? Really, what I think about is, are you self aware? And do you have the ability to self manage how you act? And so you could actually be very high ego and be a high slow person, but you better be really good at self management because that's not going to fly in most situations in terms of influence and culture and all of those pieces. So it's easier if you are low ego. If you're just naturally low ego, you don't need to self manage, you just get to operate. And so I think it's less around the balance and it's more around really probably like what is your own understanding of your own perception of yourself that other people see, and how do you then manage the pieces that maybe wouldn't work in the context that you're in. And so that's where the emotional grounding comes into place. If I think about in the past, I've advised so many founders and people managers, they want to terminate somebody, and one of my first questions I always ask is, how self-aware are they? Do they know that this is coming? Do they know that this is a challenge? Do they understand that business is shifting and changing and they're not coming along for it? And if the answer is like, no, then you kind of have to do the more cutthroat elimination style because you're not going to have space for that person to sit in the org and be potentially toxic or cause an issue. But if the person's super self-aware and they have that emotional grounding, even if they are kind of the slope is they're hitting their y-intercept, you can have a much different conversation and you can co-create the future transition of that person because you can trust that person's going to go along the way. So I think of emotional grounding as for a super high slow person, they're never going to even need to have those conversations. But should that happen, at least there could be maybe another solution for themselves in the business that's better because they can transition out with grace because they're able to understand why it's being made and they've got that emotional grounding.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think we talked about that the last time too, a little bit about when is it the right time to leave a company, right? Either when the company's outgrown you or you've outgrown the company or this kind of happening simultaneously. I feel like in the past, maybe I've quickly said outgrown the company, and not given the company a chance to grow with me, which sounds maybe silly to say, but I feel like sometimes when you give a company a chance, it'll surprise you with the other opportunities and challenges they can throw your way to keep you kinda on the edge of your seat and excited to show up every day and make a difference.
Mhm.
When coming to talking about high slope people, how much do you think it's the company itself giving them the opportunity to be high slope versus it's just a personality themselves?
No, it's 100% both. Like, it needs to be a 50-50 relationship. So when I think about that example with Jamie Whalen that I was mentioning at Dscout from the blog post, Dscout enabled it. Even from that beginning story, they said, "We don't have a job." She wasn't high slope in that moment for them yet. They hadn't seen the signs necessarily, but when she floored them, they're like, "There's someone special here," right?
Yeah.
And some things that she said that were really stand out about their particular company culture is that they really invite in critique as long as you also bring solution. So you are invited to be a naysayer and say what's not working, but you better come also with some solutions, not just complaints, right? That's the difference. And then go solve them. You were mentioning like outgrowing a company. How do you outgrow a company if you can solve all the problems you see for that company? There's no ceiling there. That's how you stay 11 years at a company and continue to grow. Her role had changed 4 times over during the time she was at the business, and she's still there. And it grew and it evolved and it changed because there were new problems to be solved. If the company is growing super fast, you don't have to look very hard to find problems to solve. If the company is stagnating, that's the problem to solve, right? And
Yeah.
so what's your role? And especially in go to market, if the company's not growing fast enough, that's on you. Like, it's a revenue conversation. And there, yes, there's product market fit and there's all these things that can slow things down. But if you're a high slope leader, again, systems thinking, you're going to look at the whole system and you're going to figure out, who do I need to work with? Who do I need to partner with? Put aside my own feelings and say, how do I create the career moment that I want to have here? And then it depends. Obviously, you can still outgrow a company. You can still say, you know what? I got this experience. I loved it. I want to try this other industry on for size or this other revenue stage on for size. And I don't necessarily want to wait for the 2 years it's going to take for this company to hit that revenue. There are reasons it's still okay to go. But I would say make that your last pass versus your first pass. Figure out first, is there more work to be done? And how do I actually solve the problem? And then on the company side, how do you create the conditions? There are so many companies that don't actually want to hear the feedback. You hear these stories of they filled out the employee engagement survey, or we don't even do an employee engagement survey because we don't really want to know how our employees think. I think there's a chance for people to really invite in a culture of open communication and critique, but in a productive and healthy way. And then that's one of the big kind of comments. And then the next one I would say is trust. High trust is like a prerequisite for a company to have high slope people really doing their thing. You could be high slope, but just kind of languishing inside of an organization. You're going to leave if you don't see that. But if you have high trust, which means your manager trusts you, the systems are set up that are giving you autonomy, mastery, and purpose in your role. These are the things that will allow you to do it. So as a company, how do you design the conditions to exist in the first place?
So you said that at some point in your career you were high slope.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, at what point in your career do you feel like you were high slope, and why was it at that point in your career and not maybe the whole time?
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I kind of feel it again now as a founder, like I'm learning again. That was part of the craving to go back and do my own thing. The first time I felt really high slope was at okay, so Hired, which doesn't exist anymore as a business. The year was 2014. I was a career changer and I took a first job in tech at a startup that there was no room for me to really grow. I was not resourceful enough in the moment. I was not playing knowledge sponge. I was waiting for people to hand things to me. The systems just didn't align. Nothing was there. Fast forward, I joined Hired and it was wild, like the difference because I felt trust, because I felt safe, and because I saw opportunity in the way things were designed. There was room for me to raise my hand. So I remember the very first example. I went through training, I was a talent advocate, and there were three of us getting trained at the same time. And I thought, there's no materials written about the training. It is literally passed down from my brilliant then manager, Matt Greenberg, telling us, here's what you do. And I was like, we're supposedly hiring 12 more of these people in the next 6 months. Is he just going to sit down and repeat this whole thing again? Let me build a guide. Let me build the systems and the tools because I'm learning it. I'll take what I'm learning and I'll explain it to someone else. And I was a previous educator. So I was like, I could do this. And so I decided to create the training program, the training module itself by being trained and experiencing it and then kind of regurgitating it out into this training opportunity. And then we were able to use that to scale the org and build out the team. And so I think about that example, and nobody asked me to build a training. I was a new hire. I was supposed to be learning, but I saw an opportunity and I didn't wait for permission. I have action orientation just completely through my veins. And I was like, this just needs to happen. And if they don't like it, great, I'll throw it out. But like, I'm going to do it. Right. So that's where the ego is. If they don't use it, I tried and it worked for me. It helped me actually reinforce my own learning. But it actually was one of the things that catapulted my career there that, oh, Heather's capable of more than the tree in front of her. She's seeing the forest. That's systems thinking, that's action orientation. And it took me having kind of a low ego in that moment to just say, like, let me just give it a try. And then I was given bigger and more projects over time because they saw that I could do them. So I was then given support. There was no customer support team. They said support is really just all the talent advocates taking turns answering messages. There was like a Slack bot that was built, and everyone would just go in and answer. But if there was a talent advocate in New York and a talent advocate in San Francisco, both could end up responding to somebody at the same time in the Slack bot. And then suddenly it was confusing to customer. I'm like, we should have shifts. We should have a system. So then I decided to solve that. And it was like, everyone's going to have a day of the week where they're on Slack. Dude, these are the requirements. This is what you do. And over time, like, we probably need a better tool at some point. So then I helped them select, I think it was Freshdesk or something, pick a tool, like do all the things. And so over time, we were able to slowly graduate. And each experience I got, I grew and I was able to add more and more things, grow more and more confidence. And so then ultimately it was 10, 11 months in and the team was getting pretty big. They needed more managers. So I got promoted to be a manager because I was the one doing the stuff without the job. And then it happened, more and more. They'd expand things. And then I saw like, hey, we could hire lower cost people that were new grads to do this job. It doesn't need to be an experienced recruiter doing it. What if we just train them? So then you see a solution, you see a problem, you just try to solve for it and you do it within the system. And so when I think back on that experience, it was only 2 years and 3 months that I was at Hired, but I think I learned and grew faster and did more than I had in some of my executive roles because I was empowered and able to do it by my manager, by the way the team was growing, all of it. So it was really actually one of my favorite career experiences still to date for what I was able to learn.
That's amazing. And I say this to you all the time, Heather, but speaking to you sounds inspirational. And it reminds me of maybe I'm now self reflecting, and I hope everyone listening is doing that too. And I hope Nikki here is doing it as well. Of like, wow, at what point in my career was I high slope? And I'm thinking back of one of my earlier marketing jobs. I worked at KLM, and during my training, they gave us a whole training manual. They did have one. and it was
Mhm.
riddled with mistakes. It was in English, and KLM is the Royal Dutch Airlines. It's a Dutch company. And I took that manual and I took it home and I I literally edited the whole thing. And no one asked me to do that. And I went in and I edited the whole thing and I handed it back to them and I said, "I'm so sorry if I'm offending anyone, but I figured you want someone to look into this so it doesn't look silly when you're handing it to people, especially if they're native English speakers." And they loved it. And after I moved countries, because I moved to America, I couldn't work at KLM anymore. I worked for the early Twitter team. And they ended up from other brands sending me a lot of presentations to improve and things to edit. And it kind of became a side hustle for me when I first moved to just do that on the side. And I've kind of always since like had a side hustle or fractional work or anything like that, just because that kind of taught me. It's like they knew I was happy to do it. I was good at it.
Yeah.
So besides the gig that I had originally signed up for, they kind of handed me more work to do.
Yeah, I mean, say there's like 3 conditions that had to be true in that. So 1, you had to say, "I see the opportunity here, and I'm gonna just take action." No one's asked me to do it. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't say, "Hey, do you mind?" You just did it. And, like, you probably spent hours having to go through and edit this thing.
Yes.
That could have been for nothing, and this is when your early career, that's scary, then bring it. That's condition 1. You had to have the action orientation. Condition 2 is that the company had to be receptive. High slope isn't just for people, it's for companies too, and a company that ego sits at the center of how decisions get made, how work gets done, never going to thrive with high slow people. They're at odds with each other. And so you essentially then had to have a company that said, we're grateful that you corrected all this stuff. Wow, free work essentially. And
Yeah.
hey, do you want to do more? That's exactly how it happened. It's a slippery slope in the best possible way of opportunity breeds opportunity. And then you had to say yes. And what I heard you say is a structural thing. I now take on a side hustle because I know that I can. It's
Yeah.
the ability to see beyond. This is systems thinking. You're like, okay, how do I want to design my life and my career? And where do I get my joy from? You are high slow. That is absolutely an example of it. And we all have those. And I hope that everyone listening thinks about times in their life and what would it look like today? Because if you had it once, you have it now. There's just some condition that's not happening that's keeping you from it. And it could be that you're tired because you're a parent, or it could be that you think you're in a role that's not challenging to you anymore. But I would challenge anyone to say, what if it was a different role? Like, what if you built the role you wanted? What if you built the
Yeah.
life you wanted? And what would that look like? And how do you take persistence and your own ego into account, your emotional grounding, and take the actions to do it? Just take a first step, not even thinking about perfection, just getting something done before it's been asked. And then using that as a learning. You become the knowledge, you grow, and then applying it to a bigger system.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying. It's built the life that you want, right? Or the career that you want. And I think sometimes we think we're stuck in a box. And I think maybe from years of having been told no, sometimes you lose that creativity or the spunk a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it takes maybe an inspirational conversation like the one I'm having with you today, Heather. And hopefully for the people listening, this is it for them to bring that back.
Yeah.
That, I mean, let's call it high slope thinking of being creative outside the box, putting your ego aside, right?
And the persistence doesn't work the first time, you keep going, you don't give up. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing right now with this business. I saw an opportunity for how I wanted to design my life and what I wanted to focus on. And I had an incredible career, an incredible job at SignalFire. And the truth is, it's scary to do this because while I get to do more leadership coaching and I get to just really focus it on high slope and focusing on these pieces, I am trading off security of a
Yeah.
salary role. And so when you think about it, like you're going to make a bet on yourself when you act in a high slope way. Even if it's as small as building the training deck or correcting the training deck, you're still taking a bet on yourself that you doing the extra thing is going to shift something positively for someone else and that there's something there. And so all the bets we make ourselves are really small or large. They're all hard to do because there's a fear of rejection. Like our brains are wired for survival. We're all worried about rejection. We're all worried about failure because failure equals lack of security, a paycheck or whatever else. What if we get terminated because someone feels offended that we did this
Yeah.
thing? There's a fear in it. And so to be high slope is actually to be quite courageous, but you can start small and don't be afraid of perfection. Just take one small action today.
It's so, I mean, I've said this a million times, inspirational. So, talk to me about starting your own company and giving up that security of a paycheck because to me, that's terrifying, but also the most exciting thing you could possibly do.
Oh, yeah, it was terrifying. Still is. As we record this, I am Not yet 3 months in. I'm 2.5 months in.
Wow.
But it's wild. I mean, so there were things I didn't know were going to be things, and then there were things that I really overestimated that were keeping me from it. So, like, I originally chose VC over consulting as the path because I'm afraid of business development, and obviously people listening to this are probably in that world. So if you're in sales or if you like that's not scary to you, but I'm an HR person. I like to do the delivery side. Like, I'm more
Yeah.
of a CSM than I am an AE. That's always who I've been is give me the job and I will retain and upsell and do all the things from there. But I want to do a little bit of delivery first. I have a hard time selling something, especially when that something is me. And when you start consulting business, you're selling yourself. That's a very daunting proposition to somebody who is a natural salesperson. And so I think that's what really kept me from doing it. But I hit a point where the desire was greater than the risk. And so I made the choice. And I think I spent some time thinking about it beforehand. You have like your shower thoughts, your daydream thoughts. Have you ever like got lost in an hour because you were like pretending like what would happen if this happened and if this happened? And I was designing this future of where things could go really right. And then sometimes I would get stopped when I'm like, but things could also go really wrong. So I think for me, just logistically, I had to make sure one, that I had the financial capability to give this a full year shot without a paycheck. What if I don't get any paying customers in the first year? Can I live on what I've saved? And I think that's important for anyone to think about if they're ever thinking about taking a bet on themselves and going into business for themselves. Because if you are desperate for business, you're not going to stay true to the thing you actually set out to do in building the business. You're going to take whatever business you can get. And then you end up finding that you're doing some task that isn't the thing you even wanted to do. And it doesn't solve the problem, which is I want to do this thing that matters to me. I want to find meaning in my work. And so I did that knowing that I was going to have to turn down business. I have gotten so many opportunities. Do you want to be our fractional head of talent? Do you want to be head of, no, like I'm not doing that. I'll find you someone who is. There's a lot of great people who do that work out there. But I was turning down potentially high contracts and job offers that I've already gotten since doing that just to like really stay true to this. So I think the first one was like financial kind of awareness of the true cost of running a business and knowing that you're going to be okay. I'll pause there. I have so many more tips, but I'm curious if that's ever like a consideration set that you've thought about in just people who take on this work.
Yes, 100%, 100%. I mean, for me personally, and a lot of the people I've talked to on the podcast previously, especially if you have kids or a mortgage, and this is a conversation we've had. I was talking to Matt Green from Sales Assembly, and he said he pretty much had a daytime job while co-founding Sales Assembly because he had a kid, he had a mortgage, whereas his co-founder completely gave everything up and fully went for Sales Assembly, and he's the CEO now. And it's so interesting because I'm in a similar boat. I have two children who are in a very expensive school. For me, the financial decision to suddenly start something,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's very privileged to be able to have enough money for a year of not having a paycheck in the best possible way, right? You worked hard to be able to put yourself in that position, but I'm sure for a lot of people that feels
Not
very far away. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so, because for me, Lars Schmidt, which is a friend of mine in the talent world, he said, you don't need to decide because he's been in consulting and he's been in full time roles and he's gone back and forth over time. And you don't need to decide, is this a forever change? Careers are long. We talked about in the last podcast. I'm a career changer.
Yeah.
I've changed so many times over and careers over. This is my, if you count consulting founder as a, I think it's not like my fourth career, right? So
Yeah.
you can change anything and I can go back. I could go in house if I wanted to. But what I wanted was what he says give yourself a year permission to set the intention that you're going to do this thing for a year. At the end of the year, put a little marker on your calendar and decide. And so I need to know that I gave it my full shot before going back, or else I'll never know. The itch will never have been scratched. And so, what your intention could be if it's not realistic for you to just quit a paid job is to say the side hustle piece. Can I commit to working Saturdays, 8 hours a day for the next 1 year, building up my side hustle to see if it could become the full time gig? And if it cannot, then I can also give it up if I don't like it, but I'm just going to do it for 1 year to see how it goes. And you figure out what that thing is for you. Maybe it's nights and weekends. I know time is harder when you're a parent, and that's something that I am not, which is part of by design. I designed it that way so that I could do this, which I know is not always a popular choice, but that was the choice that worked best for me. So yeah, I think ultimately I had to design my life and I wanted to have a cold start. I wanted to fully launch from one chapter to the other so I could be 100% focused because I know my job at SignalFire was not a 40-hour a week job. It was more than that. And there's a conflict of interest because I have a portfolio of clients here and I'd have a portfolio of companies that we were invested in there. It just wasn't an option for me with the way that I had designed my career previously. So you have to look at your situation, like again, see the forest for the trees, zoom out and look at what construction works for you and make it happen. And maybe it's not even a new job. Maybe it's something else, like a skill you want to learn or a hobby you want to take up or a long-term goal you have for yourself that you're going to chip away at over the next 10 years, retirement or something, whatever that thing is that's gnawing at you that you want to be high slope about and be a learner about and be persistent about, find that thing and take that first step.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so besides the financial decision to start,
Yeah.
you said some things ended up being bigger than you thought they were, and some things ended up not being as big as you thought they were.
Yeah.
So what is much bigger than you thought it would be?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. Let me see. There's probably two things. And I think it's my own fault. I think you also, again, I chase joy. That's something I've always done. I look for joy versus stress. And for joy for me, I realized like I really love content. I love ideating and building things and creating things. And so I always thought, oh, you start your own business. People were like, you don't even need a website. If you're well networked, just have a good LinkedIn presence, tell people what you're doing, have an email address, people will find you, have some one pagers. But then I had other people who are like, no, brand matters. And you need to have a really good website and a thoughtful brand to build up your marketing and your product marketing and have content strategy. And I thought, okay, so either of these camps are viable because people who are successful have told me polar opposite things. But where's my joy? I love brand. I love creating stuff. I want a website. I want to have cool content. Like I read a lot for school. I don't want to give that up. And so again, you got to design your life. So I probably spend 10 hours a week now on marketing. I don't have a sales engine at all. I only have a marketing engine, basically, which is my content strategy and my brand strategy. And it's really, I get lost in it. I get into a state of flow with it, but it takes up, I probably spend as many hours on marketing as I almost probably spend doing client work some weeks. And that's unpaid work. So you have to think about that too as a business of how do you price and package yourself when you recognize that you're going to be doing a lot of unpaid work because the foundation of the business. And then the thing I'd say was way less than I thought was the sales piece. The first 2 weeks were horrific because I didn't sell anything for like the first 2 weeks. And I was like, I'm so bad at this. I'd get on calls and I felt guilty asking for money. And then I would discount before they even gave me a reaction to the first price. And I just don't have the natural sales piece in me. But what I realized I did have going for me was a network of amazing people. And I realized that whenever someone was referred into me by someone who'd already worked with me and knew what my capabilities were, I didn't have to sell anything. They were already sold on the first
Yeah.
call. And so what I realized for me was I'm never going to aim to do outbound. That's kind of a knock on wood goal that I hope I can always have in my career. I hope that I can always be someone who just relies on having a really great brand and marketing presence that is value additive, not just like
Yeah.
selling yourself, but giving something back to the world. And then through that to get enough inbound referrals that I can eat and have the salary I need without having to worry. And I feel extremely lucky because I'm 2.5 months in and I've already beat my goal I had for my own revenue to make this viable. So I was originally paying myself a salary out of my savings account and I allotted that there was been this year of time that that was going to happen. But I've already in the green. I'm already profitable as a business. Like I've already paid
Wow.
back the money I used to start it. And so it's wild what can happen if you have a really good network. So I'd say the other thing is that you can start with today. Again, be action oriented. If you're like, I want to do this someday, but I can't because my kids are in school and I've got all these things, maybe it's 10 years from now, but what's the network you want to have in 10 years from now? And how do you start cultivating and developing it now in a really genuine and intentional way?
Yeah, and that's something, we talk about a lot, right? Your network is your net worth. And we talked about last time super connectors
Mhm.
and you becoming one through your work. We're pretty much out of time because we love talking and I have so much. I know, literally flew by. But then let me leave it with the last question is how to become a super connector and
Yeah.
how do you start chipping away at that, which I think is also going to be interesting for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are a lot of people who call themselves super connectors. That is not what I personally think is the right strategy because then you kind of feel like every time you have a conversation with a person, you're just like a number in their CRM somewhere that's
Yeah.
being managed. I think a couple of things. One is you have to figure out who are you and what's your unique and distinctive value you can give to the world and how can you give that away for free as much as possible. And it's also enjoyable for you because ultimately the people who I find the most value in connecting with are the ones that every time I leave, I feel like I learned something new or they gave me something. And I almost feel like, gosh, how are they so generous? But you have to be the generous one, not them. That's how you become a super connector. And then people seek you out. And so I think for me, it started with I studied salary negotiation in my doctoral program. I job offers in my negotiation in my doctoral program. I love everything related to that stuff. And then I worked in talent for a long time. I saw more than 2,500 people or so get hired in the past 10 years. I know what happens behind the scenes that other people don't see. And so when people want to get help with their jobs, I just help them for free. It's just something I've always done. I don't think that people should have to pay to get a resume review or interview prep or career coaching because they're looking for a freaking job. So like I always want to give that forward. And I think anyone in the recruiting world can do that. And so, like, what is your unique value add? Figure that out and then connect with people who might want that value add and figure out also not that you expect anything back in return ever, but what could you give? What could you want back if they offered? What can I do for you? People always ask that at end of calls. You give them something, they're like, how can I help you? Think
Yeah.
of one single thing that somebody could do for you in 5 seconds. So for me, right now, what that is I'll give away all the advice all the time, like probably more than I should to people at any given point in time because I'm passionate about it and I want to help them and I mean it. I don't expect anything in return. But if they ask, I'm like, well, I'm working on my content strategy. I'm not a natural marketer. If you see a social post from me on LinkedIn and it resonates, can you just like it or give it a comment? Because I'm trying to organically grow a following that becomes more brand awareness. So asking them to like something is so little. It's
Yeah.
1 second, as long as they agree with it too. And so what's your give and what's your get? And being really clear on that, making your give bigger than your get every single time. And if you just do that, and then you naturally invite in good energy, guess what? You don't have to go out and reach out to a bunch of people. You reach out to one or two and you give them a wow moment because your give was bigger than your get. They're going to be like, you know who you should meet? So and so. You know who you should meet? So and so. And you're going to realize who the other super connector nodes are, whether they tell you they are or not. And those are going to be the people. There are calls that I have with certain friends where every time, like, I have an introduction for you. And if they can make those and you take them up on it, and you just say yes to calls and figure out afterwards, you will suddenly have this massive network you didn't even realize. And some of these people I've never met in person. We've never met in person, but I
I
feel like we're
know. I know. It's crazy. I'm like, next time you come to New York, please, you
yes.
let me know when you schedule it. And if I make it to the Pacific Northwest, I will
Yeah,
obvious
please come. Everyone come to the Pacific Northwest.
I will obviously let you know.
No one's ever here.
So, just to make sure that everyone knows how and why to get in touch with you, who are your clients? Who should get in touch with you? And how should they get in touch with you?
Okay, so we might be booking out 6 months now because I'm getting pretty full, which is an exciting problem to have, but
Yes.
I still have room for 1 or 2 more coaching clients. Really what those are leadership people. So anyone in a leadership role, it could be that you are a first-time manager, it could be that you're a first-time VP, but you are in the biggest job of your life. Or you could be a multi-time VP, but now in a new stage of company or new industry and you're trying to figure it out. If you believe that the high slope concept resonates for you and you have it in you and you want to really harness it and grow it, and you're in this big daunting role and you want to grow it, that's who I want to coach. That's who I want to work with. That's who I'm working with. So from a coaching perspective, if you are a coaching client, that is for sure the main kind of group. And then from a company perspective, if you are looking to kind of mentor and grow someone internally in your team that is up and coming. So another piece of work that I do is like advising emerging HR people, emerging talent people. So I'll come in and do project work with you, help you build out your infrastructure for a high slope organization, but also mentor the person who is the actor in the seat doing it to hopefully up level them in the process and be that advisor or guide that helps them kind of increase their slope with the growth of the business. So those are sort of the main two kind of gigs, but I also do one-off workshops and offsite facilitation and all of that too.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
how do they get in touch with you? Should they give you a follow on LinkedIn or go to your website?
Oh, both. Can I be greedy? 2 1-second asks. One is check out waypointworks.co. That's waypointworks.co. We've got tons of content there too, so it'll be hopefully worth your while. You can read up all on the peaks framework and high slope and all of that. And then give us feedback too on the website, super open. Worked really hard on it. Yay, Webflow. And then the second piece would be giving me a follow on LinkedIn. It's just /Doshay. So, when you see any profile, just change out that backslash to Doshay, Doshay.
Perfect. And we'll make sure your LinkedIn profile is linked as well as your website when we're sharing the podcast. But everyone go give Heather a follow because she's incredible. Her content is incredible. And just give it a like, leave a comment because that would be nice.
This is so wonderful. I don't reply so much. You are the best. You need to have a TV show. So,
Working on it. No, just kidding.
yeah,
Like, bets I'm leaving you. I'm becoming a TV host. That is my new
you're,
calling.
you're
I love
ready.
it. Thank you, Heather. You are amazing. This was so inspirational. Like always, I'm leaving this thinking about all the things I want to do in my career and accomplish at Bets and beyond Bets. It's so exciting. So thank you so much for opening up and sharing everything with us. This feels like I just had a coaching session with you.
Oh my goodness. I'm honored. Thank you so much. You are the best.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening to Beyond the Hire. See you soon. Bye.